Hi, I'm Anna Maria Tapia, and I'm going to be presenting for our Business 200 Section 1700 course. I'm going to be going over the text that we've been reading in class. It's called Reframing Organization. It's the 7th edition, and it's by Lee G. Bowman and Terrence E. Deal. So to start off, I am just going to go over the first two chapters just so that we can get an idea of what the text is in regards of. And then I'm going to be explaining the first two frames, which is the structural and the human resource frames. Later on in another video, I will continue with the other two frames and then following up after that with the leadership frame integration and transformation. But going back to chapter one is just the power of reframing. It introduces us to making sense of different organizations and the way that they've been functioning, the simple ways that a lot of times leadership fails to manage because they have one way of seeing things. This textbook helps us use for different social sciences in order to implement those works into the workspace, since organizations aren't just there to produce. I think that in society we have a tendency of just wanting to complete things, but there is a process that everything goes through, and when you don't analyze that process and nurture it in some kind of way, that's how organizations fail. So this book goes over the framework, which is our mindsets that we have from our experiences, and reframing. So the way that we change that mindset, so that we can be more productive and strategic by being organized. So I am going to be going over the first frame, which is the structural frame, and then the human resource frame. Through the first two chapters, it just briefly discusses reframing, as well as the four frames, the social sciences, which specifically goes over sociology, psychology, political science, and anthropology, in order to correlate it to the work setting and different aspects of the work setting. In the beginning of the chapter, it also discusses the different analogies of each frame. So the first frame is a structural frame, and that's kind of seen as a factory, as it has planning, strategy, goals, structure, technology, specialized roles, coordination, formal relationships, metrics, and rubrics. So it's where policies and procedures are coordinated, as well as the management of where everything goes, where everyone is, what their goals are. And the second frame does use families as an analogy, as it goes over the human resource view. So, chapter 2 discusses simple ideas and complex organizations. So, while a lot of leaders might want to sweep things under the rug, it's just self sabotaging a lot of corporations in not confronting situations and trying to find a way to act on problems instead of just ignoring them. It also discusses just the concept of walking on eggshells, um, the political games that are played in corporate spaces. Um, Sometimes people get easily intimidated and don't want to take action on certain things. COVID, as an example, um, in China, when someone had COVID and nobody said anything because they thought it would just magically disappear. They didn't want to have a problem. They wanted it to just disappear on its own, and instead, it just became a globalized issue that affected a lot of different people, and just the corruption that comes alongside with people wanting to secure their jobs or their careers and not wanting to take any risks. Um, I, I'm gonna start up the structural frame. So the structural frame starts with chapter 3, getting organized. Getting organized talks about several aspects of structural assumptions, collaboration, communication, contributions from different people that specialize in multiple things or just a specific skill set. So the way that a organization is structured plays an important key in how effective people are when they work together and what their goals will be and how they will integrate and self differentiate within the environment. So, 6 structural assumptions that are made are that institutions at different levels have established missions, intentions, and goals. They achieve that by strategic planning. 2 is by setting different goals for every expertise. So that's broken up by different departments and branches to maximize their output. 3 is to sustain a harmonious environment where everyone could use their skills for the best of the organization, and that achieves regulation and authority. 4 is that environments are effective when logical responses and goals overpower personal missions and irrelevant strains. 5 is the organization's ongoing state is supported by its personalized structure. This includes strategy, technology, workforce, and environment. 6 is institutions reform or restructure when production is lacking from the ongoing culture of the environment. So this actually reminded me of a workplace. When I first started working, I was 20 years old. I was working at Forever 21 though. And I started off working in the fitting room. So my job was set. I didn't have any measurable goals because I wasn't selling anything per se. But there were policies and procedures to follow because I was working in the fitting room. So I did have to be mindful of loss prevention. So people were allowed to try on clothes, but there was a minimum amount of clothes that they could bring into the fitting room and no accessories were allowed. So after the person tried on their clothes and they decided what they liked and didn't like, they would take whatever they were going to buy and I would keep the stuff that they did not like or didn't fit them well. I would assist them in getting a new size if it didn't fit them well and they still wanted it. But aside from that, I would get things back on the hanger, make sure that everything's folded and presentable for the next client. And I would leave it out for someone called the runner. So at that time, that's the phrase that they used for the person, but that was just the person that put things back onto the sales floor after it being out in the fitting room. Or if there were returns from the cash register and they needed to be put back on the sales floor for somebody else to purchase, the runner would put it back, or sometimes at the end of the shift, cashiers would end up putting it back. Throughout the time that I worked there, my my position shifted, so they were able to pivot me from being a runner to sometimes I would close the store and I would fold up and just make sure everything was organized, or I would be put on the cash register, so I was responsible for counting whatever was in my register. It needed to be in accordance with what the machine said. Um, so change needed to be accurate. And at the beginning of the shift, there always needed to be a certain amount of money at the register, a certain amount of change just for customers. So, following that, I am going to discuss Max Weber. He was a second trailblazer that used patriarchy as a core influence to normalize several key points to a monocratic bureaucracy. So, one is the fixed division of labor, two is the hierarchy of offices, three is a set of rules governing performance, four, a separation of personnel from official property and rights, five, the use of technical qualifications, not family ties or friendship, for selecting and promoting personnel. Six is employment as a primary occupation and long-term career. Aside from him, I do want to mention that Frederick W.L. Taylor also identified the viewpoints of organization to maximize productivity as scientific management. The five P's that describe strategy according to Mintzberg are plan, which is a deliberate way to operate, perspective, the mission and plan to achieve success, pattern, it's repetitive choices, position, how the organization works with the territory it's in, ploy, a distraction to keep rivals at bay or to get a reaction out of your opposition. Um, so there are two polarized positions that each skilled person has to balance with other specializations, differentiation and integration. So while being different, you also have to find a way to work well and be cohesive. with people that specialize in other things without stepping on each other's toes. Managers must decide how to categorize different groups of people, and they do that based off of their function, which is their skill set or specialization, the time that they work their shift, so could be an overnighter or day shift. Products, so what goods or artifacts are they producing? Is it soap, shirts, tablets? What customer are they having? So what consumer or patron? I think the best example that they used in the text was like hospitals. So is your patient going to be a part of the maternity ward or the pediatric place? So what location or region are you working in? Process, procedure or course of action that enables flow. So there are two dominant ways that companies structure their operations, either vertically, which is top to bottom, it's usually a hierarchy, or laterally, which tends to be a matrix, just a simpler way to manage. Though lateral communities have traditional and casual conferences, it could also be a little bit more difficult once it's if it starts expanding or getting bigger, or if there's a transition. Later on in the text, they use eBay as an example, as eBay transitioned from being more of a matrix to going as a hierarchy. Um, Now we use eBay and it's a massive company. So aside from I'm sorry, let me go back to vertically. Aside from vertically being a hierarchy, I want to specify that they use authority, rules, policies, they structure and plan and control systems by having subordinates. So there are different levels. So some structural imperatives are size and age, core process, strategy and goals, information technology, and nature of the workforce. So the social structure will either help or sabotage an environment, just depending on the skill set, what kind of collaboration is being practiced, and the overall principles of the company. So now that we completed chapter 3, I'm going to start up chapter 4, and that goes over structure and restructuring, which has a few dilemmas. Just because with structuring dilemmas, you have a lot of different aspects that pertains to different groups of people, skill sets. Sometimes there might be friction between overlaps, or there might be gaps. So there is an underuse or overuse, as well as excessive autonomy versus excessive interdependence. And then some people might not have any goals, while others do have goals, or people become irresponsible or irresponsive. So aside from the dilemmas, I do want to go over Mintzberg's model because it breaks down a different structure that is used, that is hierarchical. So it starts off with the bottom line as the operating core. It's the foundation that keeps producing and providing services. So in the textbook, it refers to teachers as the operating core and the middle line. The middle line would be administrative assets that provide guidance by supervising, coordinating, controlling, and providing resource to assisting the operating core. So this would be in a school setting, it would be the assistant principals and the principals. The strategic apex would be the board of directors, senior executives, and superintendents. So it would be like the superintendent of the Department of Education. They strategize the design and mold the way that the organization functions. The technostructure and the support staff remain alongside to the middle line in support of the middle line. So while the operating core is doing doing producing and providing services, the middle line is responsible for other things such as making sure that everything within the operating core is functioning. So making sure that there's coverage like substitute teachers, or making sure that announcements are being shared. If there is someone missing, let's say in the cafeteria to supervise students, and it doesn't require certain qualifications, they would probably send support staff to assist in those matters. Um, the support staff and the technostructure are really there to assist the middle line. So aside from that, there are structural configurations that are derived from Mintzberg. They are the simple structure, which is the mom and pop shop, the machine bureaucracy, which was exampled as McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, pretty much any fast food restaurant that uses machinery, professional bureaucracy. Harvard is set as an example in the textbook and the visualized form. So they said Johnson and Johnson, but I immediately thought about the TJX companies, which are Home Goods, TJ Maxx, Marshalls, just to list a little bit. I know that there are a couple of more that fall within that umbrella. And then the fifth one is an autocracy. So W. Al Gore is listed as an example, as it is an innovative company. They did create Gore-Tex, and they do make floss and a lot of other small things that we use in our day-to-day lives. Just reading it through the text, I learned that W.L. Gore made Gore-Tex. I've heard about Gore-Tex for a while, but I never thought who might have invented it. Yeah. Another structural configuration is also Sally Helgeson's Web of Inclusion. It's built from the center out. In the text, it says that females tend to, I guess, be more involved, but it also does say that in the Web of Inclusion, it could get confusing. It gets challenging because when networks increase, there's less structure. So it's very easy to get lost in a community where there aren't departments or different specialties because everyone is pretty much somewhat talented or trained within everything. So there is no go-to person. And this goes back to the example of eBay transitioning from Pierre Omidyar to Meg Whitman. So the example that I used for Helgeson's web of inclusion um, just transitions us into restructuring. So there are different grounds of restructuring, which are environmental shifts, technology changes, organizational growth, and leadership changes. Three types of organizations that are troubled by their culture, according to Miller and Friesen, are the impulsive firm, which tend to be smaller companies that are just very quick and growing. The stagnant bureaucracy, which tends to be very old, traditional place, keyword stagnant. They're not trying to change anything whatsoever. Um, in comparison to the headless giant, which kind of speaks for itself. Um, the headless giant just does not coordinate well. So, chapter 5 goes over organizing groups and teams, task structure relationships in organizations. So, I'm just going to list some pertinent contextual variables that help analyze the proper structure. And we do this by knowing the mission, action, division of labor, supervision, how to make decisions, how to coordinate efforts, individual members' priority, time, quality, participation, groups' relativity to their environment, determine what is success, and determine how to assess failures. Fundamental team configurations are one boss, a dual authority, simple hierarchy, circle network, or an all-channel network. So social structures amongst groups, using sports teams as an example, help to describe an environment that produces success. So 6 distinct characteristics of top performing teams, according to Katzenbach and Smith, are to shape purpose collectively, translate common purpose into measurable goals. Management should attain a manageable size of teammates in equivalence to authority. Proper mixture of expertise and/or specializations. Establish a collaborative environment of diverse talents. Share accountability and responsibility to duties or goals at hand. So now that you have a better understanding of the structural frame and all of the different aspects that are used in order to restructure that frame, I'm going to go over the human resource frame, which is the relationship between people and organizations. It's covered in chapter 6, and it's also set as an example as family, just because it has more to do with the people that work in a community and how they are affected internally and externally. So there are 4 assumptions. One assumption is that organizations exist to cater to human needs instead of the other way around. The second assumption is that organizations need ideas, energy, and talent, while people need opportunities, a career for an income. When systems and individuals aren't aligned properly, one of them exploits the other, or the both of them just suffer. It just causes too much friction to work through. When systems and individuals are continuously in alignment with one another, on the other hand, um, both give what the other party needs for fulfillment, while the system or entity gains the talent and energy of that individual gets rewarded by having meaning and satisfaction in their life. You can predict what people value according to the text, depending on the characteristics of an environment. It sets the conditioning for how individuals may thrive, depending on their personality and previously lived experiences. This is what they call human needs. Um, in the textbook, they compare that to plant needs. Just having a nurturing gardener have the right soil, enough water, the right temperature, the right sunlight exposure. All of these different aspects help a plant to grow in a certain environment, depending on what plant it is. And humans work that same way, depending on the type of person that is, the type of personality that they have, and the type of life experiences that they've had. Um, we have different needs, and the environment is very crucial to meet those. So, knowing all of this in regards to plants, humans have needs aside from money. We have intrinsic needs. As we get older, our priorities shift and our mindsets shift as well. We mature, and it's important to keep that in mind. So, there is an old formula that is shared by Mayer. It is the ability times motivation, um, equaling the performance. So your performance is going to be based off of how well motivated you are and what your capabilities are as well. Exhibit 6.1 models motivation at work. There's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think is like kind of hits the nail on the head when it comes to the importance just the importance of humanizing your colleagues and your employees. Just knowing at the top is self-actualization, and then esteem, social belonging is below that, and then your safety and physiological, so your physical being. So, in contrast to human needs, the expectancy theory was developed by Victor Broom, and he believed that individuals take action towards rewards that they want. So, they get incentivized by benefits when they work towards them. Chris R. Gyrus also explains several ways that employees choose to cope with their frustrations at work. So they withdraw by using their PTO, sick time in excess, or they resign. Um, they psychologically withdraw while continuing to work, but they use unhealthy habits to cope. They'll act indifferent, passive, and apathetic. They'll withhold output by sabotaging, being deceptive, or feather bedding. They'll try to climb the hierarchy to better jobs. They'll form alliances, create labor unions to keep power balance between employees and employers. Or they'll project their own experiences. Or, and additionally, I should say, they project their own experiences onto their children and advise them that there's minuscule hope for advancement um, and rewards. So the consequences of downsizing are long-term when loyalty, innovation, talent, and experience is lost in comparison to employee investment, which we go over employee investment in chapter 7. So chapter 7 discusses improving human resource management. It goes over the human resource philosophy, the development and practices. So for HR, you want to make sure that you are hiring the right people, that they meet certain qualifications and have certain skills that's going to fit within the work culture. You want to maintain loyalty and empower employees. So you want to compensate according to the employee's value, ensure job security, internally promote and help people advance in their careers, be generous. So an example of being generous would be gain sharing, profit sharing, and employee stock ownership plans. You want to invest for a better output, so help your people with their training. Provide information and support. Have an open book philosophy. So that means that everyone from the top down should know what the organization is earning. This actually brought me back to when I was working at an eyewear store. The owner was very transparent about how much we were making, he was making, but we were making a living off of his shop. And aside from that, he also incentivized empowering us by providing the service of tipping, which you don't usually see in with optometrists. But there were times where I provided good service and I would get tipped $20 because that was 20% of a sale, just selling one pair of $90 sunglasses. But just opening that opportunity for customers to have that in mind, um, it helped me want to do more. And I'm sure that it incentivized a lot of other employees as well. So invest for better output, provide information and support, expand employee engagement. Collective interactions help productivity, empowerment, and inclusion. Redesign work through job enrichment. So by giving freedom, authority, feedback, and challenges. Encourage self-governing units. Incentivize growth of capabilities through each member. Advocate for egalitarianism. have a democratic workplace that fosters cooperation and equality. Endorse diversification, tailored recruiting practices, and internal mentoring programs. Organizational development include group group interventions and also survey research. This gives employees the ability to, one, work with one another through mediation, and two, survey with the survey research. I feel like it's a generalized way of giving feedback to the overall company and not just approaching one thing. And the fact that it's a collective effort gives more back and helps the environment overall. Interpersonal and group dynamics. This is chapter 8. So, interpersonal dynamics, you might want to question what is happening in the relationship, what are the intentions, and what actions should be taken when there's a disagreement, or there's rumors or gossip going on. So, Argyris and Sean determined 2 theories emphasizing the importance of interpersonal competence in management. So, theory and use model 1 goes over the most basic way of dealing with a problem, a very immature way of dealing with a problem. So, 1 would be to assume that the problem is because of the opposing person or group. 2 would be develop an isolated biased reasoning and solution. 3, try to hold the other party accountable by using any of the 3 strategies: facts, logic, and rational persuasion. Indirect influence, start getting other people involved. And C, direct critique. That means you're basically bullying the other person. The following is, if the other person resists or defends themselves, they're validating that they are the problem. 5, keep snowballing pressure in your favor to protect or reject the other person in response to opposition. So this just reminds me of running kind of running a smear campaign in the aspect of just putting the other person under pressure and just trying to come out with the solution that you want, as opposed to trying to fully understand what the whole situation is, because there is a complete lack of communication. 6, if that fails, it is not your fault. Assume the other party is responsible. Okay. Espouse theory model 2. So 1, emphasize common goals and mutual influence. You guys work together, so prioritize what actually has meaning in your workspace. To communicate openly, work transparently by publicly testing beliefs and assumptions. That means that you are ready to not just attack, but you're also ready to listen to the other party. And like, even if you disagree with them, just Try. 3, combine advocacy with inquiry. Salve and Meyer extends social intelligence to emotional intelligence, managing relationships with others by having open communication while being able to self differentiate and manage one's emotions. So, there are certain tests that people have came up with, such as the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Uh, it assists in unbiasedly helping managers understand the workflow between diverse teams of people. It gives a more methodical approach to use light terms of psychology without attacking anyone. 4 central human elements in group processes. So they are informal roles, which is the contributors, collaborators, communicators, and the challengers. 2, informal group norms and networks. Creating networks through bonding help the longevity of teams that also naturally create their own work culture. I would guess that this would mean going out to the movies as a group, after work, trying to set, I guess, not trying to set anything, but humanizing each other. Like finding something in common, like a sport, or like I said, like a movie, or if you have a colleague that enjoys dancing and you might go to the same restaurant where they have an open dance floor. Like it creates um I think it creates a smooth environment. 3, interpersonal conflict. Rather than using Model 1, use alternatives to collaborate in conflict resolution. So develop skills such as listening, communicating, managing conflict, and building consensus. Agree on the basics. Prioritize the goals and the procedures. Express conflict productively. So state your opinion without being defensive or aggressive to minimize extreme opposition. Search for common interests. So what's mutual between both parties? Sometimes, um, like I brought up before, informal group norms and networks, like hanging out with your colleagues, might help deter these very sharp, rigid differences. Um, you'll it'll be easier to find the common ground and to humanize each other. Experiment. So you can exercise both ideas and see what works best. In the text, it brings up, um, having 2 people like fight over a leadership role can see this like one person's leadership style as opposed to your own leadership style and see what the team likes. And you might find that you don't even like it once you give it a chance. That's why experimenting isn't so bad. Doubt your infallibility. So be humble and adaptable to others' opinions because you're not always right. No one's always right. Groups acquire different resources, ideas, and perspectives. So have healthy conflict, know how to communicate. Be mindful of how differences affect the team. It is an obligation to the group to work through them. Okay, and I'm going to go over leadership and decision making in groups. So, three key functions to help groups succeed with guidance from their leaders. When their leaders create a path or direction that will motivate the team to do great work, bridge the gaps between teams and outside components to expand skills and network, provide time management in accordance to priorities and milestones. And that wraps up the human resource frame. Thank you.